Why is the far right so obsessed with knights? From Alice Morrison, a PhD candidate. Wow, they really just hand this shit out to anybody these days, don't they? So, don't get me wrong, I am aware that this is bait. Although, I will vociferously argue it is at the very least quality bait. And secondly, Archive Links is a wonderful website, but let's have a quick look at this, shall we? Because there are some interesting things to look at and to pull from this article. Medieval military monks have become a regular sight at political rallies and marches. Ah yes, the Molotov cocktail, a frequent implement used by the far right. Yes, very much so. The writer is a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. Well, that's a somewhat dubious pedigree these days. Researching medieval culture and contemporary society. A sure sign of a lunatic, according to Umberto Eco, is that sooner or later he brings up the Templars. Umberto fucking Eco. We are opening with a quote from Umberto Eco. Now, I'm sure everybody knows about his definition of fascism, which is one of, if not the single least useful definition of fascism ever produced, as his definition would also fit every single society ever created by humanity. But oh well, details. But what is more interesting here is, of course, that Umberto Eco was also, rather famously, the creator of something called semiological warfare. Or as he called it, semiological guerrilla warfare. Now, I'm not going to go through all of that, what it is, as it is an entire doctrine, but in essence, think of it like this. It was the socialist doctrinalized idea of actively poisoning every well and reframing every conversation, dishonestly if needs be, in fact, better still if it was dishonest, as the entire idea came that if you received some piece of information via the media, as he argued the media was now the premier source of information and therefore the best tool with which to turn the populace towards socialism, well, this form of warfare was to take what came out of the media and then turn it into a socialist point and viewing it through a socialist lens. In other words, the definition of woke. Approaching any and all concerns, problems, and subjects through the intersectional lens. So, we begin by quoting a man whose entire idea was reframing meaning and context. That is either incredibly honest or unfathomably retarded. Or simply just mind-bogglingly arrogant. One out of the three. If Echo is right, you don't need to look hard to find examples in Britain today. Among the crowds at football games, political rallies and marches, with red crosses splayed across their goose-white tunics and plastic chainmail coifs. On their heads, the imagery of the Templar Knight. A medieval Catholic military order has been increasingly co-opted by the contemporary far right. Well, numero uno, I guarantee you that the Templar Knights would have been significantly more politically, extreme than the current day far right, but hey, details. And secondly, I don't know if you know this, Miss Alice Morrison, with a PhD possibly working at the University of Cambridge, but when English people put the red cross on them, that's not the Templars. That's the St. George Cross. You know, the one on your flag. Kill me now. I can't do this anymore. Anyways, now, does this have some sort of connection to the Knights Templar? Well, kind of, sort of, in a tortured way, but we'll get to that a little bit later. A reference to its symbolism have become increasingly common in far-right spaces on platforms like Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, and 4chan. Wow, YouTube is a far-right platform now? Christ, Reddit as well? Damn. Things have escalated quick in the last few hours, apparently. Some of this content is innocent, reels by historians discussing the history of the Knights. You should watch some of those, by the way, you haven't paid attention. But on this extreme end, our social media accounts that wrap white supremacist and anti-Muslim policies in the romanticized imagery of holy war, medieval chivalry, and Christian martyrdom. Because, by the way, as we talked about, co-opting the Catholic military order for anti-Islam policies. Just out of interest, have you even so much as read a Wikipedia article on what the Crusaders were? Because, okay, in case you haven't, this is going to come as a little bit of a shock and spoiler alert, but they were rather explicitly anti-Islam. I'm sorry for ruining that particular plot twist for you, but it is relatively common knowledge outside of PhD circles. Anyways, the phenomenon became so disruptive that in 2022, FIFA banned the Crusader costume being worn in stadiums by England fans, especially for matches against Muslim-majority countries. Many of those countries, by the way, still has Islamic heraldry in their flags, but details. These costumes are sometimes framed as harmless fun, or as patriotic homage to St. George. Literally. Actually. Physically. Historically. Literally. St. George. An early Christian martyr who became patron saint of England. Wow, I'm genuinely surprised you knew that. This creates plausible deniability, allowing extremists to present a more innocuous front to the public while simultaneously committing an aggressive, racialized ideology, those who turn it into the subculture. What is being signaled requires an understanding of the broader historical context. Oh boy. This is not the first time the image of the knight has been used by extreme political groups. I know. Oh, fuck me. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yes, indeed, one could quite handily argue that they were used very first by extremist Christian groups for extreme political ideologies upon their invention, actually, and the invasion of the Holy Lands and so on. But hey, again, details. Let's not delve into how Pope Urban II here was very much so a strident proponent of these things who had to go a little bit outside of the Holy Book to justify them. Ignore all of that for the moment. 20th century fascist movements, including Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan, relied heavily on imagery of them and other medieval Christian symbols. But who were these knights, and why has the far right adopted their imagery? Well, again, I hesitate to break this news to you, but firstly, it's just because they're hella fucking cool, okay? That's the primary reason. They're very cool, and additionally, it happens to be quite closely tied to the St. George cross because, you know, red cross on white. Which, by the way, the red cross on white and the St. George cross are not the same thing. In fact, the latter was brought about something like, 80, 90 years after the Knights Templar? Did I say Knights Hospitaller? Knights Templar. Anyways, it's not actually quite the same thing. The Templars have their origins in the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. Well, actually, you're off by about 20 years, but semantics. During the First Crusade. Again, no, the Second Crusade, but we're splitting hairs here. Miss PH fucking... God, is it this easy to get a PhD? Because if it is, maybe I should take a weekend and hammer one out. Growing numbers of pilgrims flocked from Europe to the Middle East to visit the Holy Land, but the Crusades had left the routes to the city incredibly dangerous. The Crusades had left the route to the city incredibly dangerous. I think you will find that it was not first and foremost the Crusaders who were attacking their own pilgrim routes. Difficult though that may be to believe, it was largely desert-dwelling bandits and, well, who were they fighting down there? Who were the ones occupying these lands? I have at the tip of my tongue. Oh, that's right, the Muslims. Which they would continue fighting for a fair few crusades later, but yet again, we are clearly splitting hairs here, Miss PhD graduate. With the threat of raiders and bandits, the French knight Hugh the Pays assembled a group to protect the pilgrims. Early on, a branch of the order was established in England and endowed by the crown nobility with significant estates. It was based in London in the area known as the Temple and become a notable part of English political... known as Temple... In London, the area known as Temple and become... religious and financial life. Yes. They were based in Temple, not as it took its name from it. Historical evidence suggests the early Templars were pious and dedicated to protecting others. Yes, but as they grew in popularity and wealth, their activities gradually differed from their original mission, partially from being ousted from the Holy Land, which made the whole protection of pilgrims a little bit difficult there, but again, details. By the end of the 13th century, they held property across Christendom and a huge fleet in the Mediterranean, exerted political power in the royal and papal courts, and established a powerful banking network. In fact, that was one of the earliest things they did too. However, from 1307, members across Europe arrested on charge of heresy, and in 1312, the church ruled the order must be dissolved. They had gotten a little bit too powerful and, importantly, a bit too wealthy for their own good. More than 700 years on, imagery of the Templars remains alive in sections of the popular imagination, having cropped up over the decades in films, TV, and video games, most famously in Assassin's Creed, Indiana Jones, and the Da Vinci Temple. The Order has now been absorbed into myths and conspiracy that it's founded the Freemasons, guarded the Holy Grail, even that it secretly survives today. More recently, it has gained popularity a particular cultural purchase. Parts of the right-wing discourse offer a picture of Christian society under siege again, echoing the myth of warrior monks went to battle for a Europe supposedly under attack by Islam. No myth there. Literally under attack by Islam. The reason why the First Crusade started was because Christendom looked over to its border at the collapsing Byzantine Empire and went, well, that's kind of one of our main trade partners. If we lose that, it's a problem, and furthermore, it'll allow them to flood into our lands, which they eventually, of course, did. The Crusades were an entirely defensive measure. It is not myth, it is historical fact, and as for this nonsensical idea of Western society being under threat from Islam, yet again, foreign invasion, what a silly willy, but beyond it simply looking gosh darn cool, okay, perhaps there is further justification. Perhaps recent survey census data, for example, might indicate a bit of an invasion going on, with London, a small, relatively unimportant city, the capital of England, if you've heard of it, as you clearly haven't heard about their flag, is majority non-white, English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Ireland, or British. In other words, it's not English anymore. It is a majority foreign city, ruled majoritively by foreigners and raising majoritively a foreign generation of children. London has, by all normal, natural meanings of the word, been conquered. It is not an English city, and therefore one might begin to understand why a lot of people in England are looking upon their capital having been captured and going, gosh darn it, it seems almost as if we are under siege somehow, as if we are under attack. But this is all clearly some sort of coincidence, in the exact same fashion that presumably the Crusaders just randomly decided to attack the Holy Lands for no particular fucking reason. They woke up one morning and went, God, I just want to kill all the Muslims. because that's reasonable to believe. Unfortunately, the appropriation of these symbols is not usually the harmless fun and simple hurrah for St. George that it is claimed. It can signal a more sinister desire to return to hegemonic white Christendom. God fucking yes. Holy shit, yes. Despite the fact that historians have long understood the gulf separating medieval and modern conflicts, extremists continue to align themselves with the imagined ideas of the past. Whether it's the costume of the KKK or the Templar symbols and Crusaders dressing up of today's far right, Echo's diagnosis still resonates. It does, if you take Echo's words at face value, correct. Again, Echo's entire idea was to take a point of truth, of reality, of media being told to the populace and twist it, which is exactly what you have somehow fallen for. Again, so, subject, philosophy of religion, PhD student in philosophy of religion, working with Professor Catherine Pickstock here at the University of Cambridge. A PhD, possible PhD at the University of Cambridge is quoting Umberto fucking Eco without having the faintest clue what he's meaning, what he's talking about, or the things that he himself codified in a fucking instruction pamphlet. Furthermore, having absolutely no clue about who the Templars were, when they were founded, their purpose, who were apparently to protect Christians from the paths to the Holy Lands that the Crusades had rendered dangerous. And also, again, a student at the University of fucking Cambridge is unaware of the distinction between the St. George flag and the Templars. Just in case you're wondering here, the Red Cross was used to show the allegiances of the Crusaders, the English and the French specifically, during, the late 80s, early 90s, I believe, during the Third Crusade. And, I mean, I suppose it makes a certain amount of sense. Okay, here's the other thing, right? You want to know? Let's assume this is an honest question, despite every fucking evidence to the contrary. Why is the far right so obsessed with knights? Well, in part it is, as you say, because they do feel somewhat under siege, but perhaps even more importantly, if we ignore the obvious national connection, because apparently some people don't know what the English flag looked like, even when they're from fucking England, details, it is a very fitting symbology because there are indeed an awful lot of dragons that need slaying in the modern world of politics, of which Umberto Eco is one of them. His entire idea of semiological guerrilla warfare is a dragon to be destroyed, to be reduced utterly and strangled to death so that it may never rise again. The entire concept of DEI is another dragon to be beaten with every stick imaginable. Indeed, your very own institution of Cambridge University is one of these dragons, as was so amply fucking demonstrated by the Jason Arday situation, as you are no longer an institute of learning, as we have now two wonderful examples of Jason Arday and a woman who majors in the philosophy of religion being less informed than some fucking random-ass bumfuck YouTuber. God, help, Arch. Help, Arch. Your institution has been co-opted. It has been corrupted. It has been taken over by people who could not care less about learning or about the quality of the individuals inducted into what was once its prestigious ranks. all of your titles, all of your accolades mean nothing. They are gross, rotting replicas of what they once were, pinned onto the chest of anyone and everyone capable of reciting the correct political mantra or simply being the correct skin color and able and willing with the sheer testicular fortitude required to lie without so much as a fucking blink for years. That is the dragon, of which Cambridge is but one of many. There are countless dragons that need killing in England, in the modern Western world, and in politics in general. And if the people of England wish to paint themselves in the colours of the St. George flag to slay those dragons, then by God, that is rather fitting imagery, isn't it? That is why the far right is so obsessed with knights. You're very welcome. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.